every generation has different tastes. And this next generation coming along, they aren't drinking as much. It's really interesting. How do we endure through that? And it's a big challenge for our marketing folks to maintain relevancy, to continue to believe in this thing called Coors in Colorado and Miller in Milwaukee. It's an interesting challenge.
So there's a couple of things iconic about Colorado. Yes, the Rocky Mountains, but also the beer I used to steal out of my parents' refrigerator when I was in high school. Pete Coors is here to talk about 150 years of Coors beer. Coors has been around longer than the state of Colorado. Do I have that right?
1873.
I'm gonna go ahead.
May I join you?
No, you may not. I'm going to drink yours too. Zdravia. Real stupid question before we get started.
Sure.
Do you remember, I'm trying to think, was it in the 80s when they had the pull tabs on these, and then you guys experimented with the push in?
Press tab.
They had 2 press tabs, which was people didn't like that too much. And then, did you guys develop this?
No, the stay on, what we call stay on tab, which is universal now in the beverage industry. Yeah, we were, we developed the aluminum can in the late 60s, early 70s, and the opening device, stay on, the pull tabs in those days was about 17% of the weight of aluminum on a lid, and so we were trying to save aluminum. That's was the evolution.
Well, I thought it was to make my life easier.
Well, I didn't mind it, but consumers didn't react well to it, and actually, it was one of my first meetings of our board of directors. I was in my early mid-30s, and there was a vote about whether we should keep press tab. I was in marketing a little bit at the time, and I said, and it went around the room, mostly internal board members, the management people, and came to me, and I said, no, I think we ought to get rid of it. Everybody, and my uncle looked at me. He said, well, we've never had a decision at this board table that wasn't unanimous. And I said, well, I wasn't quite sure what to say exactly, but I said, well, I think it's the wrong path forward. And he said, well, will you support the decision if we stay with press tab? And I said, no, support it and I'll promote it. And so the next thing I did was I went out to California and filmed an ad demonstrating how to open our cans.
Right, with the small hole first and then the big hole. But if you press the small hole, then you had all the pressure under your thumb, and when you let it out, it would. Yeah, I remember it.
And then the other tab would go in, and from my perspective and what I saw out in the marketplace, people didn't want to put their hands in their beer. They didn't, they get out working out in the yard or skinning off a trophy elk or something and bloody hands, and you just didn't want to put your hands in the beer. We eventually came around and
you
back
won.
to the industry.
Talk to me real quickly before we get back into the history about the can. You guys invented the aluminum can or perfected the aluminum can, and if I understand it, maybe I don't, you just let your competitors use the technology as well. Do I have that somewhat right?
Yeah, it evolved. The aluminum can really evolved out of recycling. 2 reasons. Number one, we were shipping beer from our single brewery in Golden, Colorado, 1,000 miles. So we wanted a lighter weight package. And the old tin can, the old 3-piece tin can, and quality wasn't the best. We had a hard time coating the can properly so that we didn't get metallic taste in the beer. And so Bill Coors and his engineers searched out and found a process which is called impact extrusion, which is how they used to make toothpaste tubes. Put a slug of aluminum in a die and then ram a punch through it. And
then a bigger one, and then a bigger one, and a bigger one.
And we thought we could make cans using that process. Well, it turns out that we could never scale it up. We started with 7-ounce cans back in those days.
I think I remember that.
And then, so they went to work and they developed the draw and iron process. And that's what enabled the biggest challenge actually was being able to print. You had the tin can came out in sheets, was cut and formed, so you could print on the flat sheet. Printing a can at what we now do 1,600 or more cans per minute, it's a blur. And get them all printed and have them to register properly and the different colors and everything is remarkable. So we developed with a company called Ragsdale the process of painting, and then the other piece was recycling. Aluminum could be recycled and steel couldn't. Well, it could be, but it wasn't worth anything.
Right.
So we penny a can for an aluminum can, which was our argument to keep from having deposits on aluminum cans.
When I was a kid in the 70s, I would collect cans.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, I used to collect cans, and many of them were Coors cans at my house. And like once every couple months, my father would drive me down to the Coors distributor in Littleton and put the cans in there, and I would get money.
You get real
I
money.
would get real money. I get $1.50, I get $2 or something. And it was the coolest damn thing because, all I'm doing is, I find a can, I crush it and bring it home, and I got cash. So thank you from my childhood, not only for the beer I stole, but...
that was a big fundraiser for Boy Scouts back in those days, too.
Let's get to the story. Who is Adolf Coors? How did he get here? How did it all start 150 years ago?
Well, Adolf Coors came from...
And he is your great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather. Came from northern Germany, a town called Barmen on Wuppertal, the Wuppertal River. W's or V's in German. And his father died when he was 10. And so in order to survive, he became an apprentice 3 times. First as a flour miller, which was his father's trade. Imagine at 10 years old working in a
flour mill.
In a flour mill. And then as a printer bookbinder for 3 years, and then as a brewer for 3 years.
This is in Germany.
It's in Germany. And we don't know exactly what motivated him to stow away and come to this country.
Did he stow away?
He was a stowaway. So
he was on the lam.
My personal...
Was there a contract out on him? Well, come on, we can come up with something.
My personal belief is that he was avoiding conscription in the Kaiser's army. Back in those days, had the blue coats and the red coats, and they get, last man standing won the battle or the war. And I have a feeling that he said there's no future for an young enlisted person. So at 19 or whatever age he was then, he jumped on a ship. It actually came to Baltimore. He didn't come through New York. Evidently, the harbor master caught him or whatever and said, "Look, you can stay if you have to work off your passage," which he did. He had no papers. He had no money. And he was a stowaway.
So why not found a brewing empire?
So So that came later. So he started working his way across country, and it was really the Horace Greeley story of Go West, Young Man. We think he worked on a barge canal as a steam shovel operator. I don't know where he got that skill, but he just needed work. Worked his way and ended up in Naperville, Illinois, at a brewery run by a man by the name of Stenger. He became because he had brewing experience from his apprenticeship, he became a supervisor of the brewery in Naperville. And we don't know exactly why he left there, but I guess he decided he was going to go. There's
west.
Maybe some funny stories about Mr. Stenger having 3 daughters. And we didn't really know whether they were three of not very attractive daughters, or three
very attractive
daughters, and not being able to break anybody's heart. He picked up and went west. Ends up in Denver, and started importing barrels of wine from California, bottling them and taking them by pack horse up to the central city, Blackhawk, of the mining communities, passing through Golden as he'd go back and forth, and found an excellent source of water. He had some German friends that said, well, we could use another brewery. Those days there were about 50 breweries in Colorado, all kind of craft breweries, but the Zang Brewery and the Tivoli Brewery and those. And so with a partner, he buys 11 acres on Clear Creek in Golden, outside of Golden, and builds this little brewery.
Incredible. All right, so questions galore. The Coors beer, he called it Coors.
Yes.
Because you named it after yourself. Unlike today, where every craft brewery has some weird, silly name. It's like, no, this is my name, this is my product. They can't get away from it. Is the recipe the same? Close to the same? Do you know? If I were to grab a Coors Banquet today, and one that your great grandfather made, what do you think?
It would have been much different for several reasons. First of all, the way we brew today, the process is quite different. They had open vats for fermentation. Now it's all enclosed. They didn't have any real aseptic processes. The beer was pasteurized until the 60s. And bottling, was all very, very different. Everything, packaging, the whole process. And so the beer would have been way considerably different, and I'm not sure you would appreciate it today. Although some of the craft beers I drink, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. The other thing is that our ingredients have changed dramatically over a period of time. And so whether it's the quality of hops, the quality of barley, which we make malt, actually started making our own malt, buying barley, and we also purchased malt, but we were making a certain amount of malt, which during Prohibition allowed us to make malted milk. And so the whole process, we used to brew with as our so-called adjunct source of sugar, rice until the 80s, and now it's all refined starch.
So I'm assuming Adolf had a kid or two.
Adolf had 6 children. He had 3 daughters and 3 sons. He sent all 3 of his sons to the East Coast to go to Cornell University.
Stop there for a second. This is the story of Colorado. This is the story of America. So this kid running away from Europe at 19 risks everything and can send his kids from Golden to Cornell for school.
Ithaca, New York.
That is the American dream, isn't it?
Yeah, he wanted them to be educated in chemistry, primarily chemistry and chemical engineering. And so the class of my grandfather, class of 07, Adolf Jr., Uncle Grover and Uncle Herman, class of 10 and 13, all went to Cornell. I don't know exactly where the women went. Some of them went back east to school, and some maybe not. But that's where the 3 sons went.
Did they come back to work the brewery?
They all came back, and so, and Prohibition was just about to get started, started in Colorado before it was approved nationally.
Oh, the darkness
of 18th Amendment, and there just wasn't. So it basically shut down the brewery. There wasn't room for 3 sons to be in the business. There wasn't enough money. Adolf had amassed a pretty good fortune. We think probably about $2 million, which in those days was probably a lot of money. And And he told Adolf Jr. was the one that's going to stay, and he told his other two sons they better go do something else.
Wow.
So they both left for California.
So is Adolf Jr. your grandfather?
Grandfather.
Okay.
And so Grover and Herman went west. Grover ended up in Southern California with the sole rights to distribute Coors beer, which there wasn't much in California in those days. Herman got upset, and we had come into the ownership of Coors Porcelain Company in 1913, and he thought he should be, because he was a feisty young man, was a national champion wrestler and tough guy, decided he was going to run the porcelain company. And my grandma said, well, it's not making any money and we can't pay you. And so he went to California with the sole intent to put his father out of business. He started the Herman F. Coors Porcelain Company in Northern California.
How did it do?
Not very well. It was funny because he would write his sisters and say, look, I need a little more capital. And they didn't have any money, so they go to their father, and he'd sell them shares to his sisters, which they'd give to their father, Adolf Sr., and then they would send the money to Herman. And this went on for a long time until Adolf ended up with 49% of the stock. And everybody always got along with Herman, and his one of his boys ended up running that company. And Herman's third wife had 2 shares, 2%, and she would send her shares to Bill Coors to vote on behalf of the company, which always voted for their family, but we always laughed about.
So even then, family dynamics were tough.
Family dynamics were tough. Yeah.
What did Coors do during Prohibition? I mean, because you've got this history, and then your product is illegal. First, was any produced underground? Was there any moonshine going on at the Coors Brewery?
During Prohibition, it was legal to produce alcohol for medicinal purposes.
That's the only reason I have ever had your product.
For medical purposes. It was used,
I have a prescription for this.
It was primarily used by doctors to sterilize their surgical tools. And my brother, we were teenagers. My brother and I were kind of hunting around in the attic of the old family house and found a trunk. Brought it down very ceremoniously. We opened it up. In that trunk were 2 things: 6 bottles of bootleg gin. Because my great-grandfather says, I'm never going to run out of something to drink because I don't know when Prohibition's going to be over. And a 2-gallon jug of what they called Cherry Bounce. And Doc Holland, who was the local doctor, would fill that jug with cherries, and then he would take some of his alcohol and he'd pour the alcohol in until it filled up all the space, and then cork it up, and that's what we found in that trunk. Dr. Kimball's...
was any of it still drinkable?
We tasted it. It was drinkable, but not something I think we really want to drink. All the alcohol would kill all the anything.
So Coors stayed alive making alcohol.
So we made a near beer, and we distill it to get the alcohol out. Evidently, it wasn't very, very good non-alcohol beer. And we also, that's because we had our malting operation. There were a lot of dairies. The Robinson family, as an example, had the dairy west of Federal, and all the way out to Golden. And the dairy farmers would bring milk from the dairy farms, and we would sell them our spent grain from the malting operation, and the husks and the solids, and take the malt and put it in an evaporator with milk, and that's how you make malted milk. So until 1954, we were the largest supplier of malted milk to the Mars Candy Company.
No way.
So
I had no idea.
yeah, so we're in the malted milk business. The dairies all went away, and we never made much money at it. Mars brothers were pretty tough on pricing, but yeah, that was enough just to get us to survive. Adolf Sr. Died in 1929, 3 years prior to Prohibition being repealed, and Adolf Jr. was left with this beer enterprise with no enterprise.
So had to start it all up again. Your grandfather
had to start it all up again in 1933.
Can we jump forward to when I entered the picture? Because that's really what counts for me. Growing up in the 70s in Colorado, Coors was synonymous. Yeah, there's skiing and there's mountains, but there was Coors beer. And I remember family members coming from other parts of the country for a visit, and they would always have to grab a couple cases of Coors beer because it was a regional. It's hard to imagine. Coors was a regional beer, not this national beer that we know now. In fact, I remember Smokey and the Bandit. And Smokey and the Bandit, the whole stupid premises is that Burt Reynolds is hired to smuggle a full semi-truck full of your product to some state where it's illegal to have it or something like that. What?
Well, there was a lot of what we call bootlegging going along. So until 1978, we were only in 11 states in the West. We had one brand.
Coors?
Which
we call Banquet, but was it always Coors Banquet, or was it just Coors?
Banquet name came in the late 40s, I think, 48 or 50, right around there. But it was known as Coors. That's the only brand we had. We didn't have Coors Light until 1975. But in '78, we had a labor dispute started in 1977, a strike that lasted quite a long time. We finally went back to work, or we had replacement workers. We had a national boycott that lasted 10 years. And during that time, our market share, which had been in the mid 40s in our 11 states.
That you had 40% of the beer sold?
We had 40% of the
That's
beer.
huge.
Which was huge. And in one brand.
Coors Banquet.
And Coors Banquet. And then, it's all going on about the same time we got into Coors Light. Because Anheuser-Busch was putting a pressure on from the East Coast, and Schlitz and Pabst were all way bigger than we were. All those old family breweries, Stroh, and Falstaff, and a number of others. And I wasn't doing marketing. Brother Jeff was doing the technical side, the supply chain side of the business. And one of his brewers, by the name of Chuck Hahn, invented Coors Light beer. It was a different way Miller Lite was on the market.
Right.
It was a different way of making light beer. And we thought we made pretty good beer. So we had a big debate about it'll double the complication of our business if we have
a second product.
If we have a second product.
All right, so this is you have gone for 100 years making one product.
Yeah.
Coors beer, Coors Banquet beer. Yeah, because I remember when this came out. Originally, I think it came out in a yellow can, and then you changed it to the silver bullet, which was marketing genius. But so why make Coors Light? Because you felt the competition?
Well, Miller Lite was growing dramatically. Bud didn't want to use light, and they wanted to be different, and so they had Natural, Bud Natural. Yeah. You might remember, it's still in the marketplace today, and then evolved into Bud Light. I remember Jeff and I going to lunch one day, and I took a napkin and I wrote down. I said Coors, Bud, Miller. And I started with Bud, and I said, Bud genuine Bud Light, Busch, Michelob. I wrote down all their brands.
Right.
And I have Miller Light, Miller Genuine Draft, Miller High Life, and I went through all their brands. And I came to the Coors column and says, Coors. I said, we cannot be all things to all people. We were trying to be a light beer and a heavy beer all at the same time. So from a marketing standpoint, that was not a good long-term solution. So we agreed that we would put it in the marketplace. And
you and Jeff.
Yeah.
I think you told me this once before, so let me see if I lead you to the right place. So you guys put out Coors Light. How much of your market share do you think did you think Coors Light was going to be?
Well, that's an interesting question because again, at a board meeting, Bill went around the room and asked everybody. This was after we
This is
been in
your
the
uncle.
market. My uncle, he was the CEO, and he went around the room and said, "Well, how much do the board members think it was going to be?" And
Of Coors beer sold.
the average in the room was 4.5%.
So out of all Coors product, 4.5% would be Coors Light.
Would be Coors Light, and he said, "No, I think it's going to be about 14.5%." He was 10 percentage points higher than anybody else in the room. And it was about the same time we were expanding into the Southeast, and Coors Light began to take off. And Coors Light is actually 10 times bigger than Banquet now.
Wow.
So
are you telling me that almost 90% of the beer you sell is Coors Light compared to Banquet?
of the Coors products we sell, yes.
That amazing. All right. So how to put this? Did that save the Coors Brewery? If you guys, if you and Jeff did not sketch this out and come up with Coors Light, would there be Coors beer today?
Well, I think two things. It's a good question. There's really no good answer to the question. I think there are two things. First of all, Coors Light enabled us to compete more completely in the marketplace. And number two, at the same time, we were expanding our markets into the East. Started in state of Washington and eventually Oregon, Montana, the Dakotas, and then we went into the Southeast in 1983, which we needed to just build the volume back from the effects of having the boycott. We went from around 44% market share to mid to high 20s in the course of about 2 years.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah,
that huge.
It was huge, and we were boycotted not only
not in the Caldera household.
not only by organized labor, but they made sure that the African American market, the Hispanic market, the LGBTQ market, the gay market we called it those days, and everybody else they could find. Even the anti-gun guys were boycotting us. So I spent about 10 years doing nothing but really trying to make friends in those communities.
It's still not unionized though, and it's never been an issue since. There's always been somebody who said we need to unionize, and it always seems like the workers go, eh.
Yeah, it's really it's interesting because we were able to continue to operate. I had meetings with Teamsters and the International Brewery Workers. They said, well, just give us your employees and we'll pull the boycott. And I said, well, that's up to our employees. If you want to have a vote, we'll have a vote on one condition. You can't say anything bad about the company, which is what really initiated things, the bad blood between us and the unions, because when we had the strike in 1977, the union said that, and we had supervisors and temporary people coming in to run the brewery. They said, well, it's not union labor, the beer's not any good. Don't drink their beer because it's not safe. And it was a very dirty tactic. So in 1978, I was able to orchestrate a vote. And we agreed we wouldn't say anything nasty about the union, and the union wouldn't say anything nasty about the company or our product. And we won that election 70-30. And there was another effort maybe 10 years later to organize, and that fell flat as well.
I remember those very well as just as a young man observing all that.
Yeah, they were tough days.
Coors Banquet is still brewed in Colorado.
Coors Banquet is only brewed in Colorado. We brew we brew Coors, we call Original, in Canada and a few countries outside of the U.S. But Coors Banquet is only brewed.
So if you get a Coors Banquet, it's a Colorado
It's a
beer.
Colorado beer.
How many other breweries around the country help out with the other beers like Coors Light?
So we have now 5 breweries in the U.S., several in Canada. We have breweries in Europe. And most of those breweries are making Coors Light, but the Coors Banquet is only still made in Golden.
The Coors, there's always when the relatives came out from the East, there's a thing you do. Oh, we go to Red Rocks, look at Red Rocks. You go up to Central City, look at Buffalo Bill's grave. Oh, we got to get the beer tour on the way back.
Well, and they come to the brewery with 300,000 visitors a year coming to the brewery for tours.
Coors Field. There was the Coors Event Center up at CU. You guys bought the naming rights for that. Was it a good call to buy the naming rights for Coors Field? What went into that decision?
No,
by the way, I'm not a fan of stadiums. I'm not a fan of publicly financed stadiums. Coors Field is a gorgeous stadium, and it will be a gorgeous stadium for 100 years. Unlike whatever Mile High is being called these days, which will be torn down 28 minutes after the last bond payment is made. Coors Field was just so well done. What was the decision? How was it made?
Well, when they were negotiating to bring Major League Baseball to Denver, of course, they came to us and asked us to be part of the ownership group. And I told Jerry McMorris and others, I said, look, we do beer. We don't know baseball. You guys know baseball. So we really don't want ownership. We'll take a position. But what we really want is advertising. We want sponsorship rights. We worked a really sweetheart deal to get that. We ended up with being the largest limited partner, and which.
So you guys own some of the team.
So no longer. So
okay.
Several years ago, we decided that being a limited partner wasn't the best thing for us, and so we extended our naming rights. It's been 30 years now, and hopefully we'll continue to do that into the future. And it is a gorgeous stadium. They did a fantastic job building it, and even today, when you go there, you think it's maybe 5 years old. It's been around for 30 years.
Well, it's classic because it was built to look like an old stadium, and they did a beautiful job. As much as I hate the financing, they did a beautiful job.
They did a great job.
Some of the technology, help me with some of this. So we talked about the caps, but there were also other things. I remember small beer cans that were half the size. I remember narrow beer cans. I remember something called the party ball. What was the party ball? I loved the party ball as a concept. It didn't last too long.
Well, the idea of a party ball was actually a plastic bottle in a box, and you could, for home use, for a party, you could get a party ball and it'd have a tap system. And the biggest challenge was keeping it cold, but because refrigerators weren't really built for that size. And it was relatively successful for a period of time. I think brewers generally worldwide have been trying to figure out how to crack the draft beer feel at home. And
people used to have, what was it, a beer miser or a beer keg, a little refrigerator with a tap, and you get a whole big keg. But having a whole keg at home is...
Well, it's just people don't have room in their refrigerators, and when you can get a 12-pack or maybe a case of a beer for your refrigerator, it's you can restock, and that makes sense. But keg beer, we still have some customers who have bars at home that buy what we call a 6th barrel, but a keg of beer is a half barrel, which is 15 and a half gallons. That's a lot of
That's
beer.
a lot of beer.
And unless you're drinking a lot of beer, that beer isn't going to stay fresh. So it's interesting. Today with the drinking and driving rules and regulations that we have, and the threat of getting a DUI, I think has impacted what we call the on-premise business, bars and restaurants,
Right.
Somewhat. And so there may be a case for bringing draft beer back into the home, so you drink at home. But
That's an interesting thought.
but you can do it with packaged beers. Bottles and cans are perfectly fine.
Let me ask you about Zema for a second. Were you ahead of your time with Zema? Zema, because now everyone has White Claw and all these other things that were really quite a rage. I remember in the 80s, it was Zema, which was a beer that looked like 7-Up.
The Zema was one of my vice presidents, Bob Reckholtz, his marketing people came up with the idea of Zema as is something different, as we say, something different. And basically, it's beer that was filtered through a carbon filter to take out the color and the beer flavor. And then you could add anything you wanted to it. You could put it on ice. You could add lemonade. You could do anything you wanted with it. Jolly Rancher candies was a favorite. You could put a Jolly Rancher candy in it to get it
Another Colorado grape.
Strawberry or grape or whatever you wanted. And it was quite successful, but it was ahead of its time.
Because now it's pretty omnipresent, that product, isn't it?
We just don't have it in the market anymore. I've always thought that maybe we could figure out a way to bring it back.
You did it for like 1 year, didn't you? Like a
we
retro
did.
thing?
We did an in and out. I think what really killed Zema was, I won't name names, but our marketing guys at the time says, well, Zema is successful if we had a beer colored Zema, it would be even better. And so we came out with a Zema that was
So it looked like beer.
Looked like beer, and it was a dog. I mean, that's an insult to dogs, actually. And that really kind of killed the concept. And I think if we hadn't done that, if we'd really pushed forward, what was it? What was the beer that the similar Smirnoff Ice? I think was the one that came out first. I think we could have been in competition in that realm, but we weren't into flavorings in those days. We didn't.
Wasn't even your...
And then Blue Moon comes along.
What is Blue Moon?
Blue Moon is a Belgian wheat beer. It's unfiltered, so it's cloudy, and it's served with
slice.
It's with a slice of orange, Valencia orange, and it has orange peel and coriander as part of the ingredients. It's quite different. It's quite refreshing.
Did you guys develop it or did you buy it?
No, we developed it. We had a brewer who went to Europe, studied brewing in Europe, came back with this idea of having a Belgian wheat beer, white beer, and so they started brewing it, and in the Sandlot Brewery at Coors Field, and they decided, well, we'll take this into the marketplace. And for us, anything less than about 20,000 barrels, which is 600,000 gallons of beer, is we throw too much.
Small.
We have to throw it away. I mean, it won't work.
You can always drop it off here.
And we were, we were not selling anywhere near that. So I tried to kill it. I said, oh, no, you got to come and see this thing. And we had a couple of distributors in Massachusetts, Boston, and in that area that were selling it. And I said, all right, I'll go and look. And went to one of the bars, and I very proudly bring me a glass of Blue Moon, logoed glass, with a lemon slice. Lemon's the worst thing you can put in beer. And I said, this will never work. And so 2 or 3 times I tried to kill him. No, this is going to have legs. And what happened, it's a very interesting story, really. Bars would have it, and people would be along the bar. They'd look down the end of the bar and say, what is that? Well, it's called Blue Moon. It's a refreshing new
Right.
deal and stuff. And I had said, well, nobody's going to ever put an orange slice in a beer. And they say, well, I'll try that. Began to catch traction. And then we had distributors in other parts of the country that heard about it. And they said, well, we want to try it. We want Blue Moon. And it just took off. And it's the largest it's technically a craft beer. It's the largest craft beer in basically in the world.
I remember a couple other ones, Killian's Red and Herman Joseph's. Now, Herman Joseph's, I particularly liked in high school, not that I ever drank underage.
No, of course.
Because it seemed very, very fancy pants to me. It had a darker bottle, and it had a foil top, and it was premium stuff. So I was a Herman Joseph's fan. I remember asking you one day, tell me, Pete, who was Herman Joseph? Herman Joseph must have been an incredible man. I want to know his story. So I'm going to ask you right now, as we record this, tell me, who was Herman Joseph?
Herman Joseph was a made-up name. I hate to say it.
You broke my heart.
So this is a marketing thing. I came up with the idea that it was Adolf Herman Joseph Coors. And there was never any Adolf Herman Joseph Coors. There was Adolf's father's name was Joseph. His brother's name was Herman. And so they conveniently wedged those between Adolf and Coors to come up with Herman Joseph, which I thought was fine. It's marketing magic. And it was very, very good beer.
Before you know it, you're going to tell me there was never really a Betty Crocker.
Well, I don't know. You'll have to.
No, there is no Betty Crocker.
You're going to have to ask
Betty.
Well, there isn't any. Is there any still on Betty Crocker?
No, there was never a Betty Crocker.
There's
it was
no
a made
Aunt
up.
Jemima. So
There's no Aunt Jemima. Are those beers still going?
No, Killian's is still going.
Killian's was an interesting. Well, here you are, a German family trying to make an Irish-sounding beer.
We have Foot Conan Building was our advertising agency, and they were doing a beer in France. It was a French company that had gone to wanted to do something Irish. They had gone to Ireland, and they found a former brewer who was still a wholesaler, but no longer brewing, called George Lett. It turns out his made-up name was George Killian, and they designed a package in a beer to sell in France under the name George Killian. So our marketing people said, well, let's go to Ireland and meet. It was Bill Lett was his name, but George Killian, and he was a wonderful Irish guy with the beard and the red hair and the cap and the tweeds and the whole deal, and liked the idea, and so we brought it back to the U.S. And by then it had been purchased by a company called Brasserie Française, and we had a contract with them to do Killian in the U.S. Trouble is the product wasn't very good. Their formula was flawed, we thought, and so we doctored the formula to make a beer that
I liked it a lot.
Could really enjoy. And it's not an ale; it's just a George Killian's red. It's a red beer, and we would bring Bill Lett and his wife Phoebe over, and they would do promotions around the country for us and promote the beer. And once we got the formula right, it did pretty well. And it's still in the marketplace.
Talk to me about the merger. I think about all these beer companies, even from my youth. I don't know if they're around. You mentioned something, there's Schlitz and Haps and you had all these other beers, Stroh, and I don't even know if they're around because I don't see them in the liquor store. Coors is omnipresent, that no matter where I go in the Western world, I can get a Coors beer. I'm amazed. I'm in Poland, and it's like, of course we have Coors. I mean, it's just amazing. How important was it to take it from this family brewery, merge it with Molson, and now it's part of an international company? It's a multinational company compared to this nice little Colorado brewery that I grew up with, that my relatives would steal the beer and bring it back to New Jersey with them.
Well, the truth of the matter is we were Molson was looking for a partner because they felt, being primarily just in Canada with some sales in the U.S., that they were not going to survive long term against Labatt. Anheuser-Busch had bought Labatt, and a few other brewers up in Canada, and we were looking for a partner as well. In those days,
Why were you looking for a partner?
Profitability. Canadian market was very, very profitable in those days. It's since changed dramatically, primarily because of the Canadian laws. But we felt it was a good marriage, and we had initially, when we put it together with the Molson family, we thought we would take that combination and be able to leverage that in South America and other places. Maybe even so far as to do merge with Heineken, another great world family partner potentially. And that all hasn't materialized, but the idea of bringing our companies together, we thought was going to be a survival tool for both of us. Really,
when you say survival, help me out, because is it that microbrews were growing, or is it that people were buying less beer? What was it you were surviving against?
No, the bigger guys were getting bigger.
Okay, this is Busch, and
this is Schlitz had gone down. We had a proposal to buy Schlitz at one point in time, and I got my staff together one day in the boardroom at the brewery, and I said, "All right, a lot of the marketing guys particularly said, this is a great brand, we need to do this." And I said, "All right, well, took a chalkboard and said, all the positives on this side and the negatives on this side." And when we got done, there were way more negatives than there were positives. And we had to decide whether we wanted to invest money in our brands or whether we wanted to invest them in some other brands that were doing well. And
there is no more Schlitz now.
Schlitz and Stroh got together, and then it's still available in some places, but it's very small. It's a very small piece of the whole equation.
Is Busch versus Coors, is that Coke versus Pepsi? Is it kind of the same? Because it's always seemed to be in a kind of a head-to-head competition.
Well, we ended up, as you know, putting Miller into the equation.
Right.
So now it became Miller Coors underneath Molson Coors. And so between the Miller brands and the Coors brands, and to a lesser degree the Molson brands, very important in Canada, we just had to have more mass, more ability to be in the marketplace. So when we started with one brand in 8 packages, and we call it SKUs, 8 SKUs, we now have 700-800 SKUs. Now that's
different products,
package sizes, different products. There are 31 brand families now.
All in your time at the company, you went from Coors to 800 different variations of the product.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
That's incredible.
and becoming a global brewer at the same time.
And if you didn't, I don't know if it would be around. Talk to me a little bit about, I got so many questions. We're going to run out of time, but Coors and Colorado have a special bond. And maybe it's just me, maybe it's the romance I feel growing up here. But, we're proud of a few things. When I was a kid, that's where Coors comes from. Mountains and Coors. Why do you think there's such a Western connection to the brand? I mean, you think about different brands. IBM has its brand. You think very corporate and narrow tie. Apple has its brand and it's sleek. Coors has a brand, and maybe it's just in my mind, of kind of this rugged, individualistic Western beer. This is, guy comes out from Germany, starts this thing, and it's, for me, it's a Colorado icon.
Yeah, and it's in a way it's a little bit like Miller in Milwaukee and Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis, although they're not in St. Louis anymore. Well, their headquarters are in New York for the U.S. But it's a this has been our home. We love Colorado. People, the everything, the imagery of Colorado, the mountains, pure water,
On the can.
the values of the West, I think, are really, really important assets to the company. And we love Colorado. We've been, as a family, we've tried to be generous in Colorado. And we have great employees here. It's still, the company still has a lot of very much rich family roots. And now we have the fifth generation that are beginning to take their places, and hopefully we've trained them well to carry that on.
Last question, what's in the future? You got 800 different brands, sizes, and all the rest. In 25 years, somebody else is going to be having this conversation. What are they going to be saying is happening at Coors?
I think the question is, we have brands that are enduring. We've seen this incredible surge in craft beers, and people's, every generation has different tastes. And this next generation coming along, they aren't drinking as much. It's really interesting. I don't understand the psychology, all of it, but they don't want to drink as much. They don't want to be out of control. They can't drink it. They don't drink and drive like my generation did. I'm proud of that, but we did.
No, it was a different
time. And tastes change. And so we've gone through this period of seltzers and craft beers, and then craft beers are down some, and then now seltzers came up. Seltzers are flattening out. Now we're seeing what we call ready-to-drink spirits-related beverages.
You have a rum and Coke in one can.
In one can. Wine is now, they're putting wine in cans and in boxes. Horror, to think that anybody would do that. But so I think the question for us long term, and the other thing that's been a phenomenon here of the last several years is Corona and Modelo from Constellation, which is a Mexican company. And that's a great frustration for me because their sales have just skyrocketed. So we're not a Mexican. We don't have a Mexican beer. We're not in Mexico. So how does the Coors name, the Coors brand, and the rest of our company, whether it's Miller or Molson, how do we endure through that? And it's a big challenge for our marketing folks to maintain relevancy and without going overboard. And the trick is to be relevant to your broader audience. So our consumer base actually is getting older. Guys like you, not that you're older. And how do we get people entering the legal drinking age market to continue to believe in this thing called Coors in Colorado and Miller in Milwaukee? It's an interesting challenge for our marketing folks.
Just growing up, Coors was Colorado, and now to stay alive, Coors has to be a global brand, and I just can't imagine. So whatever you've done to steer Coors to viability, we all thank you for it, and we thank you for what's it like growing up? I should ask your kids this, and seeing your name everywhere you go. I don't see Caldera Field, and I don't go on Caldera Street. I don't go to the liquor store, and there's Caldera all over. There's no posters of it. Does it go to your head?
No, I think it's just what it is. To me, I'm proud of the name, but it's just a name. I just happened to have been fortunate to arrive on the planet in a time when I could do the things that I've been able to do, and which is very exciting. I'm humbled by it. It's strange. I mean, I'll go places and people want my autograph. I say, what do you want an autograph for? Well,
I get that.
You're important. Yeah, you probably get that. It's a sense of pride, but it's humbling.
Also, some of the most successful commercials you guys had, I think, were the ones with you. For that period, you were walking around in the snow and you're talking about Colorado and the West. And also, the ones with Mark Harmon were also just spectacular, too. I thought those were some of your best.
I don't know. Is that coming through?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
My phone's turned off, but it's coming in my deals. You know, I was a pitch man for the company for 15 years, the longest running executive running a campaign of that nature. I didn't really, it's not something I dreamed up. I didn't necessarily want to do it. My family didn't want much exposure. I'd go through airports and people say, "You look a lot like Pete Coors." And I say, "Yeah, a lot of people tell me that." But I think what was important about that campaign was the family's important. The fact that we're engaged after 5 generations. Son David, now that we're in the whiskey business, he's traveling around the country and he signs bottles. People want to know that somebody from the family really cares.
Person. It's a person.
There's a person.
It's not a number. It's a person. That might be the best way to end this, because Coors has always been a character in Colorado history. It wasn't just a building. It was a player. It is a player. And so that's, for those of us maybe of a certain age, it holds a romance.
If we can continue to do that, we'll continue to be successful.
Pete, thank you so much. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.